Cool.
We're
Hey
good.
man, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Fine, thanks. Yeah.
All right. So, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Point Counterpoint podcast. I'm your host, Chris Wright, and today, as a guest, I brought on Zach Leary, and so I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hey, yeah, well, that's who I am. I'm Zach Leary. It's nice to see you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, first of all, I gotta start out with the question of, what was it? What was it like, being the son of a man that was both very, very villainized by many people, but also very, lauded for a lot of his research that was so important for a lot of this, psychedelic research and the like.
Uh, well, it's kind of a complicated answer
Mhm.
because, my first, growing up when you're a little kid and you become aware that your uh, father is famous for something that is difficult to understand. It's not like he was famous for being an actor or a movie
Mhm.
star or, and it was kind of abstract, So I spent years and years just sort of not really understanding what it is that he did. And and the first time I did, I was, I don't know, maybe 11 or 12 years old, and I was on he was acting in a film, and he brought me along to the movie set, and I was standing on the movie set, and this crew member was standing next to me. I'm just this little kid, and the crew member said, God, I can't believe they allowed this evil man to be in this movie.
Mhm.
And I just remember going, wow, why would they say that about my father? It's like such a weird thing to say. What did he ever do? What did he do to you?
Yeah.
um, and yeah, and that sort of like began the relationship of or the process of trying to understand what it is he did. So yeah, I mean, and I've spent my whole life making sense of it and being at peace with it, and ultimately being proud of us.
Mhm. And would you say that generally it was a positive experience having that kind of man in your life that was, such an influential role? And how was it that he like shaped your opinions on this topic?
Yeah, ultimately it's a very positive experience, and I it would be disingenuous to say it otherwise. I mean, his primary, I guess, mission in life was to empower the individual to create their own reality, and find their own purpose, and their own meaning in their work and in the universe around them. And again, as a little kid, that's a very difficult thing to understand when you're just trying to deal with mundane things like finishing your homework on time or something. So it, and he died when I was 22, and which is a long time ago now. Um, so I'd say now I'm probably, as I get older, I'm more. I find it to be much more of a positive experience than I did when he was alive, ironically.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, totally. You know, so as many people are aware, Timothy Leary was a major psychedelic advocate, and this leads me into the first user submitted, first fan submitted question that I wanted to get to, and it was this is from Julia
Oh,
from
cool.
Minnesota, and it was what is the most common thing that the general public gets wrong about psychedelics?
The most common thing that the general public gets wrong about psychedelics. Hmm. Uh, I think buying into the hysteria. There's been so many. It's become such a part of the gestalt and kind of like the cultural fabric to think that you know the use of psychedelics will lead to, you going crazy, you not being able to come back. That's the thing that I get most often. It's like, oh my God, am I ever going to come back? What if I never permanently recover? Or very kind of extreme, kind of urban legends, that are just kind of freak tales of jumping off buildings, or thinking you can fly, or things like that. It's like the extreme sort of cases of when things go wrong have sort of become an unfortunate part of the story. And so I think that's what most people get wrong, is that they associate neuroticism and mania and prescribed schizophrenia as sort of like part of the experience. But that said, we're living in the modern age of the new psychedelic renaissance has dispelled a lot of those rumors and shown that the research happening in therapeutic communities, the stuff going on at Johns Hopkins, NYU, the stuff with MAPS and the Pentagon, the Veterans Administration, are really dispelling those rumors. So that's great to see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we really are in an age when a lot of these conceptions that we used to think about them, like they turn you crazy, and it's possible you go into a trip and you can never come out, and they lead to psychosis. Yeah. But a lot of that's changing, especially, and we're starting to see more and more research come out where we're seeing the positive benefits, not only of recreational use but also medical use. For example, like
absolutely, and yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to mention a couple of studies that I've seen. Like there's one where they took these rats and they microdosed DMT into them, and they were actually able to see decreases in instances of anxiety in them, and also the studies of PTSD and MDMA have been very successful when paired with psychotherapy.
Yeah, you're right. Those are great studies to cite, and I'm especially pleased that, so many of these studies are coming from places like Johns Hopkins and NYU, very, it's no longer fringe science coming out of, fringe institutions, it's gotten mainstream, and yeah, it's great to see.
Mm-hmm. Like, what would you say are some of the biggest benefits of recreational use of these substances?
Well, before I answer that question, I want to preface it, because I want to take a very cautious approach, much like, I guess my predecessors have, in that I don't subscribe to indiscriminate use, and nor do I believe that everybody is a candidate for psychedelic therapy or use.
Okay.
And I have to be objective, say that, and deciding whether or not you are a candidate, if you fit, the mold or the prescription, is something that only really you can decide, and if you are not honest about that, the results might not turn out well, that's up to you. So that said, it's really important to, take a self-prescribed set and setting kind of course and look at all the dynamics therein. And, if all those boxes are checked and all that lines up, the benefits can be anything from healing past traumas to improving interpersonal relationships to maximizing your own potential as a human being to, finding more contentness and less anxiety. And then there's also the flip side of all of that, which is sort of more the Terence McKenna model, which is, like I've been listening to a lot of old Terence tapes lately for the first time in a long time. And, Terence isn't talking much about therapeutic research. He's talking about visiting the outer realms and what happens when you take heroic doses on DMT and 5-MeO, and you are on the outer limbs of existence, and the value that happens there too. And getting into those discussions becomes very difficult because it's hard to describe in English what it is that happens when you're there. But that's not to say it's not valuable.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think of some of these ideas that people say, especially with DMT, but I've also seen people say it with other things like mescaline and the like, where they talk about like it goes into like another universe, and you can see different entities. Do you think this is just do you think it's simply just a hallucination, or do you think there is something else?
No, I don't believe that it's just a hallucination. I
Mm-hmm.
believe that I just have to look at the basic neuroscience around it and how the human brain is mapped, and it's that we have a very limited frequency parameter, to exist as human beings. We can't hear everything that's around us. We can't see everything that's around us. Therefore, our emotional well-being and our emotional intelligence, also has certain parameters that has to keep us in line to exist in this world. If we could see and hear everything that was around us, we would be blinded by UV light, radio waves, and different frequencies. It would be overwhelming. And DMT and 5-MeO, all those, the kind of the more upper echelon of the psychedelic matrix, they just turn the dial up. And I'm of the opinion, again, from Terence McKenna's school, that that is not fake, that is not artificial, that is been there all along, and they just allow you to experience them.
Mm-hmm.
And within that comes, a great amount of trepidation, a great amount of panic. It's like, threatening your very existential nature is not, it's not for the faint of heart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. So that's another thing that I've seen a lot of people say about these different trips is like it's humbling, and it helps to lower your ego and to be realize your more of your place in the universe, a more accurate picture of it. Anyway,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's a great. It's a great sentiment, and as many times as we've heard it, it is an essential thing to remember. And when it happens to you, it's a very difficult thing to make peace with, because you know uh, becoming one, and what that means to become one and truly present, and to experience ego death. It can go so far to where it can make you feel like, well, what's the point? None of this matters. We're insignificant. But that's not true. How we, what we do with our time here on the planet, and how we give to others and affect others' lives, and what we do with it is important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Another thing I wanted to touch on was what do you think about things like psilocybin and how they can increase one's spiritual experiences, like for example with the Good Friday experiment? And so what's your idea on the significance of that? So
Yeah, no, the Good Friday experiment was great, and again, Johns Hopkins just did a new version of that recently. Yeah, with infusing their divinity school, and using a lot of uh, um, you know esteemed priests, and kind of predisposed divinity types, and kind of mapping their different view of what the mystical means against their experiences on psilocybin. It is it's a fantastic question, and I think it's one that has to, you have to look at it um, through the lens of thousands of years of research. You know, these experiences go as far back as recorded history goes. You know, the only indigenous cultures who did not report to have mystical experiences as a result of plant medicines were the Eskimos, because it's too cold to grow anything up there, you know. But they're the only ones, you know. Psychedelics appeared in Native American cultures, South American cultures, even as far north as Siberia, you know. And those, and what's really interesting is that when all those mystical experiences are sort of cataloged and translated now, they all share similar traits to them. You know, why is that? Why do ancient, you know, indigenous cultures that had nothing to do with each other, that were separated by oceans and continents, you know, why were there mystical experiences? Why did they have so much in common? You know, and I just think that is because, you know, it takes a lot. It takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of work. It takes a tremendous shift to experience the divine. Whether that is through meditation, yoga, chanting, prayer, and psychedelics, you know, it requires a lot. And these are fantastic places to get to and to experience.
I was not aware of the psychedelics in Siberia. Do you know what plant it was that they used up there?
It's psilocybin.
Well, psilocybin. Okay.
Yeah, there's a there's a strain of mushroom. I forgot exactly what strain. I'm forgetting specifically. I'm not a scholar on the various strains of psilocybin cubensis, but it was one of them. And just for the listeners, there is a great recent article that Double Blind, if you're familiar with the new magazine called Double Blind, which is a magazine devoted to modern psychedelic research. They're new. They're, you know, only a year old, but they put out a great article on called The Definitive History of Psychedelic Mushrooms, and I recommend it for everyone.
I'll make a note of that. Okay. Okay. There's one example that I'd like to ask you about, and it was the founder of American psychology, William James, at one point was writing about his use of nitrous oxide and how it helped him to. It was the only way that he could understand the writings of the philosopher Hegel. So I was wondering, what do you believe about the way that psychedelics and other hallucinogens can influence like your insight into these matters?
Say it again. I just, you cut out a little bit about William James.
Oh, sorry.
So William James' experience with nitrous oxides as it relates to what?
He said that he could only understand the works of the philosopher Hegel when he was using nitrous oxide.
Well, I don't know if that's a testament to nitrous oxide or if that's a testament to Hegel. I don't know. It's one of the two, man. You know, I mean, shit. I mean, go figure. You know, I mean, I only really understood ancient Gnosticism after my experiences with mescaline. So, you know, yeah, I mean, the answer for that is up for grabs. You know, I think, I do think certain little departments of knowledge, certain aspects of knowledge, certain little, like, you know, wells and, you know, kind of infinite tangents of knowledge are sort of hard-coded into the psychedelic experience. And that is why reports of the psychedelic experience, especially with plant medicines like like mushrooms and
Mm.
and mescaline, peyote, and things like that. Ones that have ancient lineages. You know, the insights that they had into culture, into self-determination, into spiritual awareness, they seem to be very similar over the years. You know, and so it's sort of like why that insight of those reports from, you know, South American cultures from a few hundred years ago are very similar to reports that we have now. Uh, and, you know, my only conclusion that I can draw is that, you know, psychedelics have an amazing knack for uncovering what could previously not be uncovered.
Mm. Yeah. Um, uh, Another question I had was, what do you believe is the most overrated or underrated psychedelic or hallucinogen?
The most overrated? Uh, well, my answer for that's not going to be very popular. I think it's ayahuasca.
Mhm.
I Ayahuasca is a powerful and fantastic, you know, worthwhile thing to do. But I don't think that for the Western mind, I don't think that the whole concept of um, going into ayahuasca ceremony with a shaman can unlock visions or realizations that are any different than the ones experienced on LSD
Mhm.
by yourself or with a friend in the middle of nature, you know.
Mhm.
And I think there's been a lot of emphasis put that has I want to say emphasis, but it's become very trendy, I should say, for you know to do these ayahuasca pilgrimages that you have to go down to Peru and experience it in under that setting, that set setting to have the full realization. And I'm just not I'm not convinced either way. I know that answer is very unpopular for a lot of the mystics out there. So that's overrated. Underrated? Did you also ask that?
I
Underrated?
did. I did. Yes.
Um, hmm. uh, huh. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if any of them are underrated. It seems that every psychedelic drug has its own fan club, that's for
Mhm.
sure. Um, Although I will say, and I'm saying this out of my own personal experience because I have not done it, I haven't done San Pedro.
Mhm.
Um, and, you know, I only hear little kind of pockets of discussion around San Pedro work. And everybody I know who's done it just says it's a game changer.
Mhm.
So I'd really like to explore that. I don't know much about.
Okay. Yeah. So the thing you said about ayahuasca and how, you know, it's really it's not really worth it to go all the way down to Peru and go through the whole process with the shaman. It kind of reminds me of the story where one of the followers of the Buddha went through all these different processes, and you know he finally learns how to walk on water, and he comes over to the Buddha and he's like, "Look, I finally learned to walk on water," and he says, "But the ferry is only a nickel, so you know you don't have to go through all those steps if there's an easier way."
Yeah, that's a great story. It's a great koan. And Krishna Das, one of my favorite modern spiritual teachers, whose method is sacred song and chant. He sings kirtan, but you know, he's gotten quite popular as sort of from the Ram Dass Neem Karoli Bamba lineage. You know, says all the time that people are always coming to him and say, "Oh my God, Christian Das, I have to get to India so I could experience, the Guru's grace. I have to go there because that's where it is." And he's like, "Well, no, don't focus on Dharmasala. Focus on Brooklyn,"
Mm,
which is a great answer. It's like, and it just all comes back to the idea that every major spiritual tradition says, the kingdom of heaven is within. That if you are seeking external, uh, external places that must bring you closer to divinity, and if you can't do it otherwise, then maybe there's something missing. Don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with going down to Peru to ayahuasca. It's great. If you feel called, do it.
yeah.
And if you feel like you need to go to Dharmasala to go get closer to your guru, do it. I'm not saying don't. I'm just saying that it's probably not, an essential ingredient that's going to, break the bank either way.
It's kind of like you don't live long enough to do everything a hard way. So you could go all the way down to Peru and go through the whole process, or if you can just take an LSD or, or any other psychedelic drug, that's easiar to do. You can do that instead.
Yeah, and I'm just
Similar
saying that,
insights.
like, but we are products of the West. We're not born into these indigenous Peruvian cultures who have been using ayahuasca, as ritual for hundreds of years. So it doesn't, like, we're taking this Western modality and just like, hey, you go down to ayahuasca, down to Peru, and all of a sudden you become part of the tribal lineage. I just don't think it's that simple. I mean, sure, you get to dabble in it and experience the wisdom of it, and it's great. It is, but I just don't think it's juxtaposing the two cultures is that simple.
Yeah. The other thing I want to get to was so you teach Bhakti yoga. So I was wondering, so like, what would you say the differences are between that and traditional yoga that people think of?
Great misunderstanding in the West is that yoga is an exercise routine. That the physical part of yoga, what we call asana, is yoga in and of itself. And doing asana is great. It's a great exercise. It's a great spiritual practice, but it is not yoga. Yoga is a complete science of understanding the human connection's relationship with itself and the relationship with the divine. And Bhakti yoga is the yoga of love and devotion. So it's based around the idea and the practice of making all your actions an offering to the divine. So you're not separating the mundane from the profound, that even the mundane can be an act of the divine. Like when you're cooking food, for instance, I'm just citing a very basic everyday thing. When you're cooking food, cook it with love, cook it with heart, offer it to the god, to the goddesses. And that's what Bhakti yoga is. It's about making your life into an offering. So you are a servant of the divine. And in turn, you develop a personal relationship with the divine that will always be there for you, that will continue to feed your soul and your heart. And within different schools of Bhakti yoga, the exercise, portion, the asana is part of it. Asana is a great practice, but don't think of it as that if you become all of a sudden this great asana yogi and you're doing complicated poses, twisting your body into a pretzel, that does not mean you have achieved moksha. It's one part of it. And for anybody listening, if to kind of get a breakdown of what true 8-limb yoga is about, Patanjali, the great scholar Patanjali, broke down what Ashtanga 8-limb yoga is really about.
Okay. And this leads me to the next listener question, which comes from Nico from France, and he wants to know, what are some ways that a beginner can get into this practice of yoga? Like, what are some ways to start the practice?
Um, well, first, I think it's about first find what it is that you want to get out of it in the first place. And that is up to you. You know, do you want a healthier sense of spiritual contentment? Do you want to feel closer to God? Do you want to have healthier relationships in your life? Do you want a better body? You know, whatever your intention is, establish that, and then try different things out. I mean, it took me a while to find my lineage that made sense for me. You know, I dabbled in Buddhism. I dabbled in uh, asana and vinyasa flow. I dabbled in the Hare Krishna movement for a little bit. I seen, you know, gurus from like ranging from like Amma to Chota Maharaj in India, you know, all sorts. I tried out many different things until I've finally was just struck with what with the school that made sense for me. So to answer the question, this is just set out and explore, you know, pick up sacred texts and explore the different traditions and see which one calls to you.
Mhm.
And when you feel, you know, it's a really subtle thing, but you know it when you know it. And when that calls to you, dive in. And diving in depends where you live, of course. Metropolitan areas are more abundant than others with great teachers, with communities, with gatherings, gatherings which are called satsangs, which means you know, sort of similar like-minded beings getting together to share in food and wisdom, and exploring that within your own community.
Yeah. And in what ways would you say that this experience can be enhanced using, you know, psychedelics, or is it in what ways is it sufficient without the use of them?
That is a controversial question, and I think many people will have very different answers to that. You know, there are many yogis will who think that inviting external chemicals into the mix is absolutely not necessary. Um, I don't necessarily agree with that. I think, well, here's what I think. I think the answer to that question, the best model to look at is the story of Ram Dass, Richard Albert. When uh, before Richard Albert became Ram Dass, when he was still at Millbrook in upstate New York with my dad, he was doing psychedelics every weekend and completely frustrated with the idea that you go up and you come down. And that when you come down, it's like, oh my God, you feel empty. And that spiritual connection you had faded away. And he became so frustrated with that. And then he went to India and he met a man who never came down, who was always there, you know, and who provided him a new map of consciousness. And that was Neem Karoli Baba. And gave him a whole new set of methods and tools to increase your connection. But Ram Dass did not stop doing psychedelics after he met Neem Karoli Baba. That's a really important distinction, and it is often miscommunicated and within the spiritual communities that people say that Ram Dass, well, he met Maharaji and then he never had to do psychedelics again. No, that is not true. He did continue to do psychedelics, but once he found a spiritual practice that he could do every day, the sort of the extreme kind of bell curve of kind of having to go up and go down became much more flat, much more based in equanimity. So methods are methods, man. It's like being attached to any one method is going to only create attachment. You know, you can't be attached to them in order to use them. You know, you have to be free to have them come and go, you know, and the second you become overly attached to them, then you become a zealot and a fanatic, and then you start saying that your method is better than the other person's, and that, you know, in my opinion, spiritual practice, the whole point of spiritual practice is to avoid getting to that point.
It kind of shows that.
Yeah, hope that made sense.
Yes, it kind of shows that in order to get the most benefit out of psychedelics, it's not just to pick them up and just start taking them immediately. You need to know how to use them properly, along with, you know, spiritual practice or whatever this method may be, and be able to control it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, you cannot. Absolutely, man. It has to be an integrated part of your overall, you know, formula. And like you said, like you just said, you have to be able to control it. You can't let it control you. That's when problems start to occur.
Yeah. I suppose another thing I wanted to get to was, so you describe yourself as a futurist. So in what ways would you describe? So like, what areas of futurism, you know, just interest you? Or
Well, I would look at it from an evolutionary standpoint. It's naive to think that human beings have stopped evolving. You know, however many hundreds of thousands of years ago, you know, we came from the primordial ooze and sort of evolved to sentient beings and became Homo sapiens. But we're not done doing that yet. You know, the human condition, the Homo sapien, is not done evolving. And whether you like it or not, probably the most logical next step of evolution is going to be a fusion with technology. You know, this brings up images of cyborgs running wild with chips implanted into the brain and becoming mutant creatures of cybernetic warfare or something, you know. But there is going to be some kind of fusion with this whole web of technology that we've created, and it's most likely the next step in evolution. So that's where I'm a futurist. I think it's irresponsible to completely shun technology and just push it away and blatantly say, you know, reject and say, oh my God, we're using too much tech. We've got to get back to nature. True, we do need to get back to nature, but you cannot dismiss the tools that we have created for ourselves. We have to learn to use them wisely and to apply them intelligently and to not let them control us. You know, they are just they're tools. And I believe that, you know, the human being of the future, our children and grandchildren, are going to be the stewards of whether or not we've gotten this right. And of course, the jury's still out, but the train has left the station. You know, we are living in the age of big data. We're living in the age of social networking influencing our news intake, our idea intake, how we share information and disseminate misinformation. We can see it going wrong all the time. So being a futurist is taking responsibility for those actions.
okay, kind of like with Neurolink, just recently did a prototype of a pig where they put their neural implant in there to as a, you know, as a prototype demonstration. And so I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I believe that I believe they might be starting it with humans probably next year, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's hey, I mean, if there is a safe way to implant a chip in my brain that's going to regulate my biological functions and create the optimal health of my heart, and tell my smartphone when I'm getting too much cholesterol or what foods I should avoid or where my blood levels are at, my, you know, insulin levels, you know, and just looking at my whole physiology. If there's a chip that can be implanted that can help with that, I say embrace it. Fear is a powerful mechanism, and that, you know, it can immediately lead to my God, chips are going to be implanted into our brains, and Big Brother is going to keep tabs on us and be able to control us and hack into. I mean, there's a million dystopian fantasies that you could unravel from that, but I choose to be an optimist.
Or if you want to use it to simulate a psychedelic experience as well.
Hey, we'll see. We'll see.
I suppose the last thing I wanted to ask you was just, have you heard of Alex Gray, the painter?
Yeah, I love Alice Gray.
So,
He's a friend. Him and Allison are friends, and yeah.
Yeah, so I just wanted to ask you about what you thought about his art, and you know, how accurate you would describe it for a DMT experience or any
I think
psychedelics.
Alex Gray, yeah, I think he is one of the few people ever that I've ever known of who can express in a visual representation what the psychedelic experience looks like and thus feels like. Somehow he's gotten it right. He has painted landscapes that, hey, they're representative of my experiences, no doubt. And for that, I love Alex. And he's not only an incredible artist, but he's an incredible thinker and paradigm shifter. And what he's done with COSM, the Chapel of Sacred Mirrors, and establishing community around that is fantastic. Alex is a hero.
Do you think that maybe his work is really doing a lot of work to, you know, try to put out some more accurate information out there about psychedelics instead of simply some of the misconceptions that we had before?
Absolutely. I think Alex's work tells you that don't worry, the water's safe.
Mm-hmm.
Jump in. It's going to be okay.
Yeah, so I just wanted to use this last little bit here just to ask you, like, where can people find you, and what's some of your more recent work that you've been doing?
Currently I'm working on a book on psychedelic integration. The book is solely about integration. It's not about the history of psychedelics. It's purely about how to integrate your psychedelic experience into daily life, thus equating with that being the real work. You know, I don't believe the real work of psychedelics is what happens afterwards. It's not what happens during the trip. Yeah, so I'm working on that. The book is called "And Now the Work Begins: A Manual for Psychedelic Integration." And you can find me at zachleary.com. The website's just down for the moment, but it'll be relaunched within a week.
Okay. I'm excited for that book to come out. I'll have to check that out. Okay.
Thank you. And thanks for having me, man. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for coming on. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Talk to you soon.
Namaste.
Yeah, thanks, brother. Have a good one, man. Send me the link when it's ready.
I will.